You're welcome back. This Newsfile is your most authoritative news analysis show. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. My guest on the show, Eko Duncan, also is Eric Osei Sibe and Kojo Pong Kroma, as well as Isaac Adongo. Now, the show. Kojo, let's get some of the points you have made out of the way by way of reactions.
Okay, I'll try and make it as quickly as possible, and then I'll come to the Imani argument. My brother Isaac makes an argument about he doesn't know where we are getting the budget to GDP ratios from. You see, in this country, when you want statistics, there are various sources. There's the Bank of Ghana, there's a statistical service, but usually one of the most reliable sources that you find data from is what our finance ministry and what our authorities report to the development partners. And even for that one, you will find that they usually have revised data. So when you take our budget, he is referring to 2009 budget, which was read in, I think, the first quarter of 2009 because there was a change in government. And he's saying that based on that budget that he has cited, the debt to GDP ratio as at end 28 was 52%. Am I right, Isaac?
Yeah.
That's his argument.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I'm telling him that currently the figures, the revised figures that are being reported tell us that it's 32% as at that time. And if he's relying on that figure, at the time they read that budget, he knows that those were provisional figures. They usually put an asterisk at the top there, that this is a provisional figure, that it will be revised when all the numbers are in. He talks about the CD dollar, total debt stock, etc. And Dr. Bawumia has been very clear that, listen, you cannot, or you can choose to do that, but he's of the view that that doesn't tell the true picture. If you choose to look at the total debt stock of Ghana over the years, and you divide by today's exchange rate, which is as a product of your own management of the economy. So assuming that you mess up the forex market and the exchange rate or the cedi depreciates, and the exchange rate goes haywire, you're going to get a lower debt figure. So if you use that as a measure of what the debt is, you can do that, but you are deceiving yourself. So he prefers another model, and that's why I started off by saying that you will have different models. The important thing is that you want to look at what the end picture is. And most importantly, what policy prescriptions you are coming up with. My senior was talking about the fact that it's about policy choices, and I fully agree with him. So again, if you look at that, what Dr. Bawumia keeps saying consistently is that pick the debt figure for the year, use the exchange rate for the year, and you will see the dollar equivalent as at that time. You can do it over the years and begin to ask yourself a question that, so what has been the total, and therefore what has it been used for? I don't want to get into too many numbers, because at the end of the day, like we have said, we can agree on point 1, point 2. Even something as simple as the deficit figures. When you look at the Ghana Statistical Service figures, which I suspect my friend Atufo was referring to yesterday, they'll give you a set of figures. When you go to the IMF report 1616, published in January 2016, you will find that they are giving us these figures. Those are the revised figures, the 12.2 that we are talking about. So for me, this is the big picture. Is it true that the size of the economy grew by about 459% under the MPP, and that has only grown by 40% under the NDC? Is it true? If you say it's not true, you do your own computation. Say again?
It can be true.
No problem. So do your computation and tell us that, okay, maybe MPP, it grew by 200. It's not 459 because you used a different model. Grew by 200. And now it has grown by, I'll grant you something as 45. You will still see the big picture that with a certain chunk of resource, somebody at least did 200 and you've done 45. That is the big argument we're having. And we are saying that looking at those trends and those trajectories, if you continue at this rate, we are going to be in trouble.
Right. Now, quickly, if you can look at two issues that Imani raises.
Yes,
and these are some of the issues that most of us can relate to.
Yes.
Please, you have your time, Seth.
Yeah.
Now, in Imani's point 5, they say that the NPP says that, make a claim that they brought down the treasury bill rate. We assume he's referring to average 91-day rate from 42% in early 2001 to 24% by the time it left office in 2009. They say this is far better. Okay, he says this is far better than the NDC's performance. Now, Imani says this whole line of analysis is a bit contentious. In January 2009, when the NDC assumed office, the treasury bill rate reached a monthly high of 28%. This is roughly comparable to the rate at the end of 2001. In between 2001 and 2015, the rate has fluctuated quite erratically. Dr. Bawumia would have to compute complex mean rate variables for the two periods he is comparing, rather than try to use two arbitrary points in time to make his point. And number two, they say average lending rate is now about 40%, which is worse than the situation under the NDC. This is the claim. And that one too, they say this is another claim that is rather hard to ground without complex mean rate analysis over aggregate periods.
So the question to Imani, and I'll come to the big picture about Imani. Right. When they used this formula, what was the answer they got? And does that answer depart from the substance of the argument that Dr. Bawumia is making? Because I've used some of their formulas. Let me give you another example. Go to A2, where they talk about the fact that if you look at the minimum wage in dollar terms, okay, they agree that, well, yeah, you know, the general point about the NPP raising the minimum wage in dollar terms is correct. But they are prescribing another formula. If we use their formula, it would have moved from 0.8 to 1.5, which is still 87.5 under the NPP administration. And then when we use the same formula for the current one, it's 10.5. You can use a different formula. You will get to the same point. I don't want to be uncharitable to my good friend Imani. Imani is an organization I very much respect. If you look at the speed with which they delivered this response and the speed with which they've delivered some responses to some of the NPP papers, it appears as though they are in a hurry to punch holes. But I keep reminding our people, everybody who is watching us and listening to us, look at the big picture. Because even when you use, and when they mention this mean variables, did they do the computation for you? Did they tell you therefore what their policy prescription will be? The policy prescriptions don't change. And that's the point. I'll give you another example. I have with me here the, I've missed Kwekubako all of a sudden. I have with me here, yes.
He's listening. He's a text message here.
The economic and financial policies for medium term of Ghana.
Yes, I'm finished
14th April 2014. Let me read you just a few things. The NDC government told us that all that they were going to do in government was premised on the GSGDA 2, 2014 to 2017. Listen to this. And that they were going to pursue macroeconomic stability. They were going to create the appropriate fiscal space for accelerated investment in key priority programs in partnership with the private sector. They were going to go for strategic investments in human capital, infrastructure, human capital, like allowances that are being paid to teachers and nurses, all of those things, infrastructure, human settlement, science, technology, etc. I'll take you to another part. Fiscal policy. They talked about their fiscal policy objectives. The objectives that they themselves set for themselves doesn't change even from the policy prescriptions that Dr. Bawumia is talking about. The problem is that the way they have managed things, the results today are at variance with what they set for themselves.
Thank you.
And that is why we are suggesting that you need to get on a certain path to get things
now, Ike, let's have you also do your reaction, and then I'll refer you to some points that Imani also talks about. Let's see whether they are valid or not.
Yes, I think the first thing we need to understand is that when you do analysis to arrive at a certain conclusion, based on which you are making policy proposals, you need to be consistent. You need to be consistent in your analysis in order to allow us to be able to understand whether you are being objective or you are twisting facts in order to support a predetermined position. So that is the first point, and that is exactly what Bawumia does best. The first thing is this. If you look at the issues that Bawumia raised, what were the issues? The issue to do with, first, painting a picture of a gloomy economy in order to arrive at a conclusion was first to pick the best year of MPP's performance in GDP, which is 8.4, and pick the worst year of NDC's performance, which is 3.9, not even the 4.9 that the year will end with. And based on that, conclude that the entire 8 years of NDC is 3.9. And concludes that the entire 8 years of MPP is 8.4. I cannot imagine any kind of analysis such as this that is intended to inform debate and discussions about the issue. That's what he did. The other issue is that Bawumia talks about 2012.
Okay. Just hold on 1 minute.
Yeah.
I understand that the finance minister Seth Terkper wants to make a direct reaction to some of the analysis that Kojo Okonkwo has made. Honorable Seth Terkper, thank you very much for joining us. Forgive us for holding you on the line for a while. Yes, let's hear you, sir. Hello, Mr. Terkper. Hello, Mr. Terkper.
Yeah.
Yes, can we hear you, sir?
Yes, good morning and good morning to your listeners. Actually, I was to join the conversation. Unfortunately, the link was not too clear. Hello, yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Very clear.
Yes, thank you. I said I was to join the conversation from the beginning and to listen, but the link wasn't too clear. But I managed to monitor some of it. Let me make a few quick points. I made a point yesterday that if we are going to use Dr. Bawumia's model, let us use it comprehensively. Indeed, you couldn't be using a model for only debt, using exchange rates, when you have other factors linked to macroeconomic management with respect to GDP, with respect to inflation, and with respect to deficit and all the other indices. Secondly, assuming that one grants Dr. Bawumia even the right to use his model, he shouldn't be selective. It is important that he could have used his model throughout. He shouldn't go back and use data produced by Statistical Service, Bank of Ghana, Ministry of Finance, when it suits, his criticism, and then revert, to his model, when, it doesn't suit him. Let me also make the point that if we were to use Dr. Bawumia's model, how do we compare ourselves to Cote d'Ivoire? How do we compare ourselves to Kenya? There is a certain international standard. There is a certain sub-Saharan African standard. And I think it is important that if you are putting up a model, you should be comprehensively, it should be internationally acceptable. Let me point out one flaw in the model. Dr. Bawumia in his model states that Ghana would have, NDC would have borrowed $39.9 billion. On the other hand, Dr. Bawumia does not dispute the basis for the computation of the GDP, which is not his model. Now, if you compare the two, you see the inconsistency. First of all, that equates the borrowing by the NDC to Ghana's GDP, because Ghana's GDP is around $40 billion. If you granted and held even the 2008 stock, which is about 8 billion, 9 billion, and you add it, that is 47%, 47 billion. That definitely takes Ghana's debt to GDP ratio above 100%. The question is, if Dr. Bawumia uses Ghana Statistical Service data and says that our debt to GDP ratio is 70%, even if you dispute the 63%, 70% of 40 is around about 28 billion. It means a remarkable performance for the debt to decrease to 70% from 49 billion to 28 billion. You see, so this is the inconsistencies. And this is a selective use of information, which we are saying is very dangerous. Let us be consistent. When Dr. Bawumia was deputy governor, the very data and basis that we are using for the calculation, and by the way, is exactly what is being used now, except for two major events, the rebasing. And again, this is a very important point. The rebasing started from 2006. So it is important, when you are comparing pre-2006 and pre- and post-2006 data, to be very careful what you are using, because the GDP grew. A good example, certain aspects of services were included in agriculture, for example, cocoa board marketing and others. When a rebasing was done, that gives prominence to services, and these were added. So you do not have the same basis. So I think it's very, important, and I believe that Dr. Bawumia, as a professional, could have pointed out to some of these differences.
Right. What do you say?
Let me make a very important point.
Okay.
The HIPIC era is over. And the HIPIC era that allowed borrowing by both the NPP and the NDC are over. And therefore, if anybody is promising levels of expenditure today at 70%, either the person is going to add to debt or the person is going to generate revenue significantly above the 17.5 or 80% that we have. And I think it's important to be accountable. This is where strategy becomes very important. We have debt management strategy that we are pursuing. And it is that debt management strategies that is helping us do two very important things. We are slowing down the rate of borrowing and at the same time continue with infrastructure development, as evidenced by, the tour of His Excellency the President. You could see. Now, it is important, therefore, that if you say that you are going to expand, you are going to expand infrastructure, you are going to be doing things that will benefit, the communities. You must tell us where the revenue is going to come from if you are not going to borrow, especially if you are criticizing the current government on account of debt. Some of the policies that we have put in place, I think it's important that we focus on initiatives.
Okay.
We have ring-fence oil revenue, for example. As we speak, we are beginning to pay down our debt through the sinking fund.
Right. But
we
Bawumia,
took 2017 bond. We took a portion of 2017 bond with $130 million US through the sinking fund. This is a major initiative.
Right.
Because our debt in the past have all been bullets. We cannot continue.
Right. I wanted
others like Exim. I do not have time to go through. I'm aware. But I think it's important that both parties also address the initiative, such as the use of partial risk guarantee, which is making it possible to bring in the independent power producers so that our 10 fields and our Sankofa fields, can secure those private sector investments.
Right, Mr. Terkper, can I? Hello, sir. Hello.
I think these are some of the things that we need to talk about.
Thank you very much. Can I get you?
It's very important, and my key point is
it doesn't appear he hears me.
But if we are going to use a model, it shouldn't be used consistently. It shouldn't be selective.
Right. Now,
you shouldn't take Ministry of Finance basis, Bank of Ghana basis, statistical service basis.
We've already covered that point. But Mr. Terkper,
revert to your own basis.
Mr. Terkper, can I get you to comment on two bold statements, very emphatic, that Dr. Bawumia makes, and ask why you are unable to do that now? He says that corporate taxes shall be reduced from 25% to 20% in an NPP administration, and he says capital equipment will be tax-free. VAT on imported medicine not produced in Ghana will be abolished. VAT on domestic airline tickets to be abolished. VAT on SMEs to come down from 17.5% to 3%. Why are you not able to do this? He says this is possible in the very early stages if they win power.
Now, I know a bit about taxes. The 20% is when you are in a particular location. It is not across board. The standard corporate income tax rate has not changed. It's 25%. When you are located outside Accra, then you could benefit from 22.5. You could benefit from 20%. Particularly the 20% and others apply to those who are in the districts. And therefore, that's another misinformation.
Why is it misinformation? Because your average. Sorry, hold on, sir. Your average is 25. He wants to reduce that to 20.
Which is part of our tax law.
Yes, I'm saying that your average or standard is 25. He wants to reduce that to 20.
The VAT which we are talking about was meant for small and medium taxpayers. The VAT is based on a principle of input VAT and an output VAT. You charge the customer output VAT at 17.5 on the sales, and you take a credit for the 17.5 on your purchases. because small businesses do not maintain accurate records, the 3% is an approximation that says that if you take the sales and you deduct the purchases, the value that a small business has added is 3%. When you do that, and that is just the 3%. What the NDC did, which was the regime that existed before the NPP came to change it, was to increase the VAT threshold and take out, small businesses from paying the VAT apart from income tax. So when you pay your income tax, the rate is in lieu of both income tax and VAT. So I think it's important, when we are doing this, that we understand the principle that we are talking about.
Okay.
Dr. Bawumia claims they reduce, taxes from 35% to 25%, and it's on NPP. For the record, our corporate income tax rates, those who are old enough to remember, were as high as 55% and 60%. In fact, mining and others were 65%. During the structural adjustment days, that is when it took a consistent policy to reduce it from those levels to the 35%. There has always been a program to reduce the taxes to a liberal level.
Yes, Mr. Terkper. Yes.
And therefore, it is a policy that was in existence, which the NPP came to follow.
Thank you.
Let me also say that
Mr. Terkper.
If you say that you want to reduce the VAT rate, you want to reduce the rate of import duties on raw materials and on all that, you have a few issues to clarify to Ghanaians. How fast can you do it? The question becomes relevant because we are part of the common external tariffs of ECOWAS. Are you going to send a derogation for the 15 countries plus, to change the VAT regime for the entire 15 countries, import duty regime for the entire 15, countries? We are also in negotiations with the European Union, the EPA, based on this. So I don't think that we should be taking these simplistic statements, of face value. Because we have signed on to the common external tariff. And by the way, the harmonization of tariffs in West Africa is not a new phenomenon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Terkper. Thank you very much for your time. Let's get back to the studio and let's have the guys in the studio continue with the discussion. Thank you. It does appear that he's unable to hear me when I interject to want him to address further specific questions. But thank you very much for coming on and sharing your views with us. But that's such an indictment on what Bawumia has done.
I think I was
if I may just react to some of the things.
Yes, he was reacting to you, so go ahead.
In reaction to some of the things. And I wanted to ask him, you see, for example, and he's a man I respect. He's a very good person when it comes to tax. He's a man I respect. I respectfully disagree with him on some of these submissions. Because, for example, when we calculate debt to GDP ratio using the debt stock and the projected GDP for March Q1, and in his supplementary budget, he says 63. We say when you actually do the right, because our view is that he used year-end figures. He says that's the way to do it, so it's 63. We say that's not the way to do it, so it's 71. Let's not argue about that. What does the global economic standard say when you cross 60%? That's the big picture. That is why the IMF is describing us as a highly debt-distressed country.
That's what the global economic standards say.
That's what he's saying. When you cross 60%, you are getting into trouble. Of course, there are countries that are even above 100%, but look at their currency issues. They don't have some of the currency issues and fluctuations that we have.
He spoke directly to the bold statements about tax.
I will come to that.
This is very huge.
I will come to that.
And he says Bawumia appears not to be aware of the common tariff.
I will come to that. There's another point that is made about HIPIC, and he makes the argument that HIPIC is no longer existent. So when you find any government or anybody making big promises, it means only one of two things: that he's probably going to increase taxes or go for higher revenue.
He's going to raise
taxes, yes, or he is going to have to borrow some more. Have you heard President Mahama promising free boarding and free tertiary? Is my senior Mr. Terkper telling us that therefore by implication that's what President Mahama means?
No. Sorry. I didn't hear him say it means you will raise taxes.
What did he say?
But that you will generate more internally. Does that mean by
He
only by
gave two
taxes?
options. He gave two options. And we all know the percentages of tax revenue and non-tax revenue in this country. So if you are talking about even revenue, I'll grant you that revenue. What does it mean? Now, my senior brother Isaac talked about the fact that we are talking about a 1.6 billion budget, out of which we are hoping to do some $1 million per constituency. Dr. Bawumia, in answering that question, said, it was a question about where are you going to get the money? We have asked the question that we've borrowed 39 billion. We can only see 7 billion in infrastructure. Where's the rest of the money? And we are pointing to the IMF report that says that it appears it's gone into consumption. The question is, where is the money? The question is not where are we going to find the money to do the infrastructure. Okay. Let me just land my point. You see, here's the argument. When we say we are referring you to the 1.6 billion, we are saying that there's already an infrastructure budget allocation. We will not let it be centralized here in Accra. We'll spread it across the country.
Okay,
now, in reference to the last question about taxes, taxes. Let me just learn about taxes. Why didn't somebody just vote to go out of the Brexit? I'm coming. Let me land. My senior made an argument that these are policy choices of government. The MPP, when it came into government, took similar policy choices, reduced tax rates, in spite of whatever conditions in which we were. So it's not that we're oblivious of those. We are talking first about things that will make our country survive and our economy go forward. Okay. Within the broader context of people around us.
Thank you. Hold on. The tax issue, which is it?
Well, I just want to comment on what Kojo just said.
On the tax
On the tax
yes,
issue.
because it is Isaac who is speaking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, on the CET, the common external tariff, it's true that is now something that the entire ECOWAS member states have actually accepted, and Nigeria is seriously implementing. Ghana started just about.
So what's your understanding? What
that means is that
may be possible according to.
Well, but there's a way out. There's something we call the IAT, the Import Adjustment Tax, which is actually a safeguard measure for countries to, if you find out that there's a grace period for the implementation of the CET, which is 5-year grace period. So within the 5-year implementation, if you find out that you are having, for example, unexpected import surge that is actually killing your domestic industry, you are allowed to either increase or reduce certain taxes within the CET. If the minister is aware of that. So countries within the 5 years can actually change the tax rate using the IAT, which is a safeguard measure.
Can I get a direct answer from you on this? Bawumia says tax on SME is going to reduce it from 17.5 to 3%. Do you believe him?
Well, I mean, that's I mean,
when there's direct answer.
Wherever there's hope, there's always a way. If you have the will, Nigeria, for example, the VAT is about 5%. Yeah. In spite of so if you want to do that, you have to make some fiscal adjustments, switching here and there to be able to do that. So it's a policy choice.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there some reaction you want to give, or a point didn't finish you want to finish?
I think the first thing that I mentioned, which Seth Terkper mentioned, is the fact that you have to be consistent in your analysis.
You spoke about consistency.
Yeah, exactly. That was the biggest issue. Because for instance, wage bill, the minimum wage, you realize that it's gone from 2.25 to 8 Ghana cedis. So you want to downplay it, so you move to dollars when it suits you.
But this consistency thing, all of you have been engaged. Let me make a point.
I think to you some of the time.
Allow him.
Then you play the point of per dollar. Just because you are not doing well there. Why are you not using the purchasing power parity by looking at the inflation? Okay, and he talked about prices increasing. Of course, we are not looking at price at one point to the other. At any point in time, price would increase. But you are looking at the rate of growth of the prices. You are looking at inflation. And inflation has consistently done better in NDC than it was in MPP. And so, in terms of purchasing power, you ended with 18%. We are 16.7.
Let me read to you.
16. Let me finish. I'm using statistical service figures. And that's 15.
Oh, now you like statistical service data.
Of course. You don't like it. I like it. No.
Okay.
Let me finish. These are current figures.
Hold on.
It's okay.
Why are you interjecting?
You see, you were talking about interjecting.
Let's hear you.
So in any case, we will be interested in purchasing power and not you going back to use a formula that suits you. The issue about whether or not, you can all of a sudden scrap all taxes. We need to know that there are rigidities within our budget. And those rigidities are obligations that we can't just throw away. In our budget currently, we have about 11 billion of wages and salaries. Okay, this 11 billion we can't do away with unless you want to say that you want to cut down on how much you are paying workers.
Okay.
Again, we know that you have alluded to the fact that there's an interest component in our budget of about 10 billion. So that already gives you about 22 billion that you have to deal with. If you are scrapping everything tax, obviously about 50% of what they have listed, our taxes are gone. So let's grant that our 50 billion, including even the borrowing that they are against, is our 50 billion. Let's take it half of that out. You get 25 billion. So after paying your salaries and your interest costs alone, you are left only 3 billion to run Ghana. So let us not deceive people. We know that this is not achievable. It is just a political gimmick in order to deceive the people of Ghana to take power. But it can't be done. The issue is that...
Imani says this is use of fair use of data for valid criticism. And Imani says, number one, Ghana's GDP has shrunk by 5% in USD terms under John Mahama. Imani says that Ghana's GDP per capita roughly quadrupled by 4 times under the NPP, but has grown by less than 20% under NDC, taking all money value factors into account. They say that there has been a revenue shortfall of about 700 million Ghana cedis for the first half of the year. They say a raft of bar taxes have been slapped on goods such as bicycles and ambulances that do not deserve these taxes.
You see, Seth Terkper said the HIPIC era is over, and it is over for good. We have to find innovative ways of generating revenue domestically. And we shouldn't think that because we want power, okay, we start criticizing everything that allows us to look inward in order to build this economy. So just simply saying that I'm going to reduce taxes. In fact, I was surprised that when Kojo was talking about capacity building, development of human capital, he quickly went to allowances. I mean, human capital development is bigger than that. No, it's bigger than that. We're talking about infrastructure development of 123 schools that will allow our kids to have education, and you are talking allowances.
Right.
We're talking about massive infrastructure development that improve the health care of the people.
Let me get
and
to
that is what we're talking about.
Let me get
let
to
us not allow people to just want to read
the two men here
with the inflation.
Yes, Kojo wanted to raise this inflation figure when
of their supplementary budget.
of the budget
Which year?
on the subheading inflation.
When?
Oh, this is your budget.
This is the most current. This is the most current.
This is the most current. Okay, please let me read.
Up to which period?
Let me read.
Yes.
Inflation rose slightly to 18.9% in May 2016.
Yes.
And reduced to 18.4% in June 2016.
Yes.
You are saying inflation is 16%.
The last reported inflation figures
Yes.
from Statistical Service. What is the figure?
So your budget doesn't
I'm
matter
asking
anymore.
you. No, but we are in September. No, we are in September. Listen, we are in September, and I'm talking September. I'm talking September.
Okay.
I'm reading to you.
Listen, I'm talking September. And September is 16.7.
You get into the selectivity
Exactly.
mode.
We are talking September here, and we are not talking May, June.
Okay,
we are talking current.
So you
And
prefer
current,
the
what is
September
inflation?
16%.
Of course.
He prefers the May, June
The current
18%.
figures are what we are dealing with, and
Okay.
inflation today.
Okay, so my
but we
last-
achieved
my last-
single-digit
my last,
inflation for
my
3
last-
consecutive years. It
My
wasn't done
last
in
question to you
so
is that
power is a lot better.
Bawumia says, bottom line, this is corruption and this is incompetence that is leading us to all the problems that we should look forward to, and we have suffered all over. Said there's a foundation that was a solid foundation built by Kufuor, and what John Mahama has succeeded in doing is to gradually and continuously destroy that foundation and repeatedly tell Ghanaians that he's laying a solid foundation. What do you say? He says corruption.
And I'm saying
the Ridge and the Legon Hospital example he gave another. He said Dambai College. There's a staff college, a staff bungalow built at 900,000 Ghana cedis. When the NPP did the same structure for how much? For about 3 times or more than
195,000.
195,000 Ghana cedis.
So this is 4.6 times more.
Right.
I'm saying that particular project he's talking about doesn't exist. He has to bring the proof. I mean, it doesn't just exist.
Okay,
I mean, it is his imagination. Let me make my point.
Mr. Blackwa says, oh no, I'm just correcting the visualization. Mr. Blackwa says that a project at that cost does not exist.
Not that the project does.
Go ahead. So the point I'm making here, the point I'm making here is that we need to understand what Bawumia was doing. Bawumia was simply painting a picture that favors him. What is the straw that he's talking about? The straw that he says will let the economy grow by double digits in 2 years? Have we ever seen a REIT foundation in 2016 that generates growth of double digits in 2 years? So he was exposed there. He himself could not hide.
Because international bodies have confirmed that
everywhere. So that cannot be the foundation Bawumia wants us to believe. Bawumia wants us to believe the foundation that will make him make his propaganda.
Okay, thank you.
So
thank you. Now let's hear from Doc. See, yes, I haven't come to him. I haven't come to you. So
No,
just
he has
hold
not
it.
won.
No, he has not. He came in to react to something and to share a point with us.
Sorry.
Now, in all of this, we're actually now being told that we are going back into the borrowing market. Is it? I don't know how you guys refer to it. To borrow again through Eurobond. What are the implications?
Something. Before I come down, let me just react to a few things about the issue of selectivity. I think both parties, to a large extent, are at fault here. I mean, because I remember in 2008, when we were talking about fiscal deficit that the government has recorded, the NDC kept saying that the budget deficit was about 19% or thereabout.
But at least
because they were using the old GDP as that's the budget deficit to GDP. And so it gives a very high figure. Now, while the actual figure is about 6.6%, that is when you use the rebased GDP. The same thing applies to when Honorable said that the debt to GDP as at that time is 52%. Now, he is right, but the only difference is that the base that he's using is the old base, which is the non-rebased one. So somehow politicians often find ways of choosing and selecting and doing that. Yes, the issue of Eurobond, going to the Eurobond market, recently was quite interesting when the Ghana...
This is an indication that confirms what Bawumia is talking about.
Well, I mean,
about
like I always say, every country borrows, okay? There's no country in the world that doesn't borrow. But when you're borrowing, there are certain key things that you need to look at. The term structure of the loan that you are taking. Okay, what is the terms? The terms comes in two forms. The term to maturity, and then the interest that you are going to pay. So you can decide to borrow, but these are the key things that every financial person or every economist will be looking at. Now, when the economy is in difficulty, you have to borrow. And when do you borrow? You only borrow when you are engaging in deficit financing or spending. Okay, you are spending more than you are generating in terms of revenue. Now, when you go out there to borrow, for example, last time when we borrowed at the cost of 10.75% for a period of 15 years, which, well, in terms of cost, it was very high, 10.75. But in terms of the term to maturity, it was good because it gives you enough latitude to actually mobilize enough revenue to pay. 15 years was good. Now, just recently, this minister went out, the Ministry of Finance also went on roadshow to raise about 750 million. That is good because for any money that you borrow, it comes in, it's an inflow which comes to shore up your domestic currency, which also comes to give you some kind of fiscal space to be able to implement some of your key projects and also like refinance some of the maturing debt. But the issue is where I don't seem to agree with the issue about it was oversubscribed, which then means that once it's oversubscribed, the investor confidence in the economy is high. I will not wholly accept that because, one, you are getting this loan at a term of 5 years and you are getting it at interest rate of 9.5% thereabout. Fine, the interest rate has reduced, but the number of years, if you are to calculate what we call effective rate of interest, where you have 15 years and you are paying 10.75%, and where you have just 5 years, and mind you, 5 years, as soon as you flinch your eye, it's here, it will come soon, and you have to find some money to pay. 5 years will soon come, and you have to pay 9.5%, which is high. If you have to do the streams of payments that you do over a period of 15 years compared to streams of payment that you do over a period of 5 years, and you discount, you realize that what you are paying now is actually much higher than what you would have paid even if you are paying 12% in for 15 years. So it is not anything favorable. And then also, when you say that there's oversubscription, if you compare the international capital market to the market conditions, as we've been saying, is not that favorable, because if you look at the European market with the Brexit, the risk profile with those economies have increased. If you look at what is happening in America with the elections and all that, the market conditions is not that too favorable. And so even with that kind of condition, if you investors are still ready to offer 9.5% for your bond, then it's very high. It's still relatively high in that sense. Okay. And if, for example, you have 4 billion in assets, the issue is how much were they asking to pay on your bond? Because often they all bid.
Right.
And so you need to also put that into perspective. So politicians will always pick and choose one that suits them, and then they will put it out.
Right. And Mr. Duncan has been paying attention to that and laughing when they are doing their selectivity. Now see, the prescriptions that Bawumia gives, the tax cuts, there's a raft of them. He feels, and he's very bold at making those statements. So you can be sure that the NPP is setting of those things, because if they don't, if they happen to get to power, then Ghanaians will scheme them. What do you make of the prescriptions he's giving going forward to ameliorate what he says is the suffering of Ghanaians and to keep the economy back on a path of growth?
Thank you, Samson. You said I was looking at them and laughing. Of course, the question is, why are we concentrating on these two parties so much?
He's also going to do the same.
Why are we? Because
they've made their presentation, so we use that.
Yes, but Ghana has the uniqueness of only being the political system where the two alternating parties are both blue parties.
Funny.
It's a really funny thing. So it is important that you look at the red side, and when you look at the red side, you will see a lot of differences and the appropriate prescriptions as well.
Right.
So I will proceed from that thing. Now, why are they focusing? NDC is more concerned with talking to Dr. Bawumia. Dr. Bawumia said this, Dr. Bawumia said this, They should talk to Ghanaians. They should talk to us as to how they are different and how they are going to promote the prosperity of the economy. And on that respect, the underlying concepts of their policies,
they should be concerned. Dr. Bawumia is saying that the quantum of money that has come to you, 12 times what went to the NPP, means you should have brought this kind of comfort to Ghanaians, and Ghanaians can't see it. Dr. Bawumia says there is some mystery money, missing money, which he seems to suggest has gone into corruption. He used the Legon hospital, he uses the Rich hospital as examples, and Ike has a problem with that. He says he's not considering the facilities here and the facilities there, except that he fell short of telling us what the difference in the facilities will be.
The reason why they shouldn't be looking at Dr. Bawumia is the fact that, they should be looking at how these policy choices or policy differences bring prosperity to our people. So they should look at the underlying concept and not the figures, and not focus on disputing Dr. Bawumia, but telling us that we have policy differences, and these are the differences. Okay? As the CPP would do, for example, we would tell them that we wouldn't look at Dr. Bawumia and what he's saying at all, because we know that the underlying concept of the policy choices are the same.
And but Ghanaians are interested.
Yes.
That's like Kujo said earlier, Dr. Bawumia has become some sort of an economic prophet. He says things, he's disputed, he's ridiculed to a certain extent, and then he's proven right by time.
Samson, that interest is misplaced. That is the point. And that is why we have listened to these two parties for 32 years and nothing has happened. You see? So we should be looking
That's a serious point, though.
Yeah, we should be looking at a new narrative. No, nothing has happened. The unemployment is the same. The deindustrialization is going on. You know, Ghana used to be a manufacturing hub in West Africa. You know, it's now completely deindustrialized. We are totally import dependent. You know, and this is the outcome of 32 years of structural adjustment, privatization, stabilization by a deficit reduction strategy that doesn't work.
But that's why we have one district, one factory.
Exactly. I'll come to that if you want
there
me
was
to.
one district, one polytechnic.
If you
it
want
never
me.
happened.
You see, the failure. You see, that is where.
One district, one polytechnic.
Please. He's brought a very important question. You see,
one district, one polytechnic.
Exactly.
This one district, one factory is
a bad idea.
Nobody will take it
no.
seriously.
That is not what I want to say. It is not a well thought out policy.
Oh,
and I'll tell you why.
They have said those things.
I'll tell you why. It's not a well thought out policy because the fundamental question is that what difficulty of the economy is the one factory going to address?
should I answer?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So there are two big problems. There's a major problem with jobs.
And then we take a break from here.
There's also another problem.
Are we going to have another time to also...
No, because he's asking the director saying something. Please,
Yes, sir. Before you answer,
yes, sir.
Unless you don't want him to answer.
No, I don't want him to answer.
Because Ike is saying that would be unfair.
Yeah, exactly.
And already he's been complaining a lot about being interjected and Kojo not getting interjected as often as I do. Ike. So if you don't want him to answer directly, end it here. Let's take a break and return to deal with the other matters. We'll be right back.